Okay, so if you were to give yourself a job, you are the boss of this company and you're hiring yourself as the manager, because that's really what it is. You're wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
You're the owner of the business, but you also at a point where you need a manager right now.
Yeah.
Like Bezos is done with Amazon. He's not involved, but at one point he was the CEO. Now he's gone. So he was both founder / CEO. You see that on people's titles all the time, right? If you were to hire a CEO, what are the things you would have them do, right? And say, okay, well, I wouldn't have them blogging or, things that aren't something a CEO would do. That's crazy. Okay, well, most people, they aren't at that point. They can't do that. That's fine. We're going to get to that. That's why the paid process exists. So the next thing, and this is where people skip.
Hello. Welcome to another knowledge bomb episode of Lead to Greatness, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential and together change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Chris Michael Harris. If this is your first time joining us, please consider subscribing and hit that notification bell and hit that like button. This will be greatly appreciated in helping getting out this content to great leaders and great individuals like yourself. Chris is the founder of StartupU, an interactive online learning platform that teaches entrepreneurs how to take an idea or an existing business and turn into a highly successful, profitable business. Chris teaches people the effective steps of turning an idea into revenue-generating business. On this episode, there's so much information you're going to learn on today. I hope you're excited. Please help me welcome Chris with starting business the right way. Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
Actually started my first business way back when I was in college, and that quickly grew to a multi-million-dollar company while we were literally still in our mid-20s. And I just found a love and a passion for teaching people how to do the same and establish that own freedom to go live outside the 9-to-5. So that's who I am. That's what I do.
Yeah. Just that first business, what was it?
Started as a residential moving company for college students.
Wow.
So when they're moving during the summer, we found that 80% of students move every single year. So 80% of the building is turned every year. Yeah. And they're moving old grandma's furniture and they needed help. Yeah. And a lot of the parents preferred that their peers or their fellow students would move them versus, some middle-aged man coming into their daughter's apartment. Yeah. So that's what ended up just taking off and kind of taking a life of its own.
What were your mind? What were you thinking to, put this together, seeing this was a problem, seeing everything with the parents being comfortable? I mean, what was going on?
Yeah, Cedric, it's a great question. I tell people this often. Most people think that entrepreneurship is just this big, has to be this big, sexy idea. Yeah. And oftentimes it's just observing the world around you and seeing problems where there's not a viable solution, or at least not the best solution, and then augmenting that solution. Look at Uber. Uber was just an augmentation over the taxi cab business. It was just more accommodating, and it was easy for people to make money to do it. And it just made a lot of sense, right? To just leverage people's cars already driving anyways. It just made sense. Yeah. So for us, we were living in a college apartment, living the college life. And we saw that these two girls were trying to move this big fold out sofa, sleeper sofas. And those things are heavy, man. This iron underneath those things, they're heavy. Yeah. They were struggling to move it out of that building that we lived in. Literally just people lived down the hall from us. So we helped them. Mom tipped us $50. I was like, hey, I think we can make some money doing this. And I'd always been doing side hustle stuff like that my entire life. It was mowing lawns or detailing cars or whatever, just always outside the 9-to-5 mindset, right? Yeah. So I was like, let's make a flyer. We knew the lease office manager well, and let's just see if she'll recommend us. And that literally was all it took for us to make like $8,000 over the next 45 days. I mean, just like that, just moving people out of that building. And then this is important too, because you asked, how did you learn what the parents wanted? And how did you find out stuff about the intimate details of the industry? Yeah. And my business partner always says this, and it's really important. She says, clarity doesn't strike, it unfolds. We didn't go into that thinking it was going to be this elaborate business venture or it was going to turn into this thing. And we knew the market intimately and all these stuff. We gleaned that insight through just rolling up our sleeves and doing the work, man. Like I did hundreds of moves myself before I even hired anybody. And I think a lot of people, they think that like this moment of brilliance is going to hit them. Yeah. Like boom, like the light bulb goes off. And certainly that happens along the path, but it really is just rolling up the sleeves, doing the work, and you start figuring things out as you're going. And that's really what happened with us. We found out what the market was looking for by just being immersed in the industry.
I love it. And I definitely want you to talk a little bit more about that because you have people, want to start a business, but they feel like they have to have all the answers. They feel like they have to have the business plan, this
Yeah.
5-page business plan written out. I mean, let's talk about that. What would if it's someone, a listener that had
Yeah.
that type of idea, I mean, how can we pull that idea from them and plant some new seeds inside their mind?
I'm going to say, so I agree with what you said completely. And I'm going to plant a seed that is a little bit different than what most people will say.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen this work extraordinarily well. Go get a job in the industry that you're thinking about starting a business in.
Brilliant.
If you're super risk averse, if you're like, hey, I have responsibilities, I can't just go quit my job, I need a paycheck, all those things. And those are real things. I mean, the cost of living ain't getting cheaper, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right? I've seen this often where people say, hey, you know what? I really want to start a business in the fashion industry. This is a friend of mine actually did this. So what'd she do? She went and worked for somebody in the fashion industry because guess what? It's like a paid internship.
Yeah.
So she was learning all the things that I mentioned to you about learning the inside, the insider information about the industry, developing relevant contacts. But then the last one is this. You'll find out pretty quick in that job if it's an industry you want to really be in or not.
Yeah.
If you get in and it's a toxic industry and it's not in alignment with your values, or you don't see yourself long-term really wanting to do that anymore, guess what? No harm, no foul. You go somewhere else and get another job. And that's totally normal. And it's a good experience, something good for the resume. Now, so that's the safe route, right? That's the super risk averse route.
Right.
If you're like me, I'm chronically unemployable. I'm the guy that jumps off the cliff and I build a plane on the way down. If you're like me, I can't stomach another day watching the clock at my job. I need to do my own thing now. And that's absolutely how I was. Then here's the deal. You need to be a side hustler. You need to have, like I just mentioned, Uber. I wish the gig economy existed when I was starting my business because while I was building my business, Cedric, I was refereeing basketball games. I was working softball tournaments where I was like the host. My friend of mine ran a softball league and I, did the host for the tournaments on the weekends. I was flipping clothes on eBay. I mean, I was doing all these side hustles and having to drive a long way to do them. If I could have just turned on an app and delivered food or delivered groceries or drunk people home from being downtown and then worked on my business full time and maybe I had to lower my living standards, which you should be doing anyways, just as a general principle of life, always live below your means because in the long run, you're going to establish that freedom fund and you're going to be able to do whatever you want to do one day.
Yes.
Right. None of us do that. We live in a microwave society. Everybody wants it now, right? And social media doesn't help in that capacity at all. But I get it. If you want to go for it, go for it. Get roommates, move further away from town, whatever you need to do to lower your living expenses so you can do your business full time. And the beauty is it's getting more and more inexpensive. You can start a business online. You don't have to go do what they used to do back in the day, which was find a good location, get somebody to invest in whatever it is you're doing. You're going to have to incur a ton of overhead. Like all those things you're going to need. You don't need that anymore. You just need a way to put food on your table for a period of time so you can get your business off the ground or at least figure out if this is something you actually want to do long term.
Man, that is a knowledge bomb out of the gate. Great information for us. Listeners are excited and on the tip of the seat, ready for more. I want to talk about what are some key steps someone should consider before leaving their 9 to 5 and starting their own business without breaking the bank.
Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing is research. Not enough people. We have more data. Can you imagine? And I honestly, I say this to people more so when it comes to marketing, but in this capacity too. When I hear people complain about how much work it's going to take. Oh, it's just so much to do. Do you know business owners 50 years ago would have killed for something like Google Analytics?
Absolutely.
Would have killed for something like Uber Suggest?
Absolutely.
Would have killed for something like the ability to go to vidIQ or TubeBuddy and look at what people are actually searching for, looking at analytics and see how much traffic they're actually driving. They have no idea. They're totally guessing. Totally guessing. They're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to have a spot in the newspaper in hopes that people are coming, and they have no idea if it's actually working or not. Well, our sales went up this month. Something works. We don't know what. There's never been a time in human history that's been easier to start a business than it is right now. And the reason is because of data. And so there's a couple of different tests that you can do if you want to test your industry or test your market. But I really recommend Google Trends. If you can type in your specific search query, right? So let's say it was like moving company, right? You put that into Google Trends and match it up with other established industries. Match it up with other things that are relative, things that you know. Look at seasonality. Look at how much search volume is there. Google Trends will show you certain regions of the country where that's hotter than others. So for example, in this specific case, I remember this. If you put student movers instead of just moving company, only a few states actually showed up, right? Like we're really hot markets for student movers, for people searching for student movers. If you put moving company, it was a little too broad, but at least it gave you more exposure if you were outside of those states. Now, here's the deal. Let's say you built an entire business around that specific term, and there's nobody searching for that term anywhere in the world. It's basically like you set up a lemonade stand in your closet. You can have the best lemonade in the world, but ain't nobody gonna find you, right? So that alone is gonna be great. Looking at competitors or other people in the industry, and they've left you a trail of breadcrumbs. Success leaves clues, right? So if you're looking at what they're doing, if they're not on Twitter, why are they not on Twitter? What are they doing on Instagram? Do they have a YouTube channel? What's on their website? What language do they use? What are the FAQs on that website? So pick 3 to 5 people in your space after you've done this deep dive work about the industry on Google Trends. Pick people and make sure you know everything about what they're doing. You should know the founders, where they went to school, what their mom and dad's name is. I mean, obviously not being creepy, but you need to really know how they got their start, how they got to what they're doing, and how they're now where you want to be, which is hopefully a successful and thriving business. Those 2 things alone, before you even get started, will literally have you run out of the gates, because here's the deal. There is no sense in you making the same mistakes that they made if they've already made them for you. What's the sense in that? People always tell me this. People always say, and this is a relatively comparative, example here. They'll say, I don't have time to read. What? Tony Robbins wrote a book about how he's succeeded in life. That's literally his diary that he has given to the world about how he has succeeded. What could you possibly be doing if you want to have a life like Tony Robbins that's more important than reading 10 pages a day of a Tony Robbins book? You tell me what's more important than that, right? It's crazy, but we have these concepts, this conditioning in our mind about what's important and what's not. So the biggest advice I would give to a lot of people is, before you leap, you better make sure you know where you're leaping, right? Don't dive headfirst in the pool if you don't know it's only 2 inches deep, because you're going to get burned. You're going to end up with a broken neck. Right. So you need to make sure that you're taking calculated risks, not risk for the sake of taking risk. And a lot of that comes back to being so fed up with the job, being in a toxic workplace, having a bad boss, whatever. Right. So just make sure, if you are seeking greener pasture, that research is going to let you know, this is a place that I can go bear fruit. This is a place that's worthy of me planting my seed, because I've done my diligence, I've done my research, and I've seen other people thriving in that market. And I'm going to challenge people on this. Most people think if they see competition, guess what they do, Cedric? Can't do it. Somebody's already doing it. And I saw a newspaper article, but it was a newspaper article from way back when. And it said, can little old Walmart compete with Target and Kmart? That was the headline on the newspaper article.
Oh man, I would love to see that.
Imagine if Walmart said, we can't. These guys already own the market. We can't, there's no way we can compete, right? So that's I would rather you find competition than find none. If you find none, it's 2022. Every single idea has been thought of by now. It's just the reality of the situation. There's no such thing as a brand new idea. There's iterations and augmentations of current ideas, but nothing is a brand new idea. So you want competition. The key is to then figure out on your data and based on your analysis, who is underserved and how can I serve in a better and broader capacity?
The knowledge bomb. Man, this is great. This is so great. I want to do a follow-up question to earlier. What are some common mistakes you see business startups make?
Oh, goodness. Well, so that was one that I just mentioned. They leap before they know where they're leaping. That's a huge one. I would say this as well. Starting a business is going to take 4 times longer than you think. It's going to cost twice as much as whatever you speculate. The problem is that the entrepreneurial type, right? And there is a type. There's more of a spectrum now than there was before. Before, it was kind of, entrepreneurship was relegated to the truly crazy people that they just didn't fit in the box that is the world. But now with the internet, there's more of a business owner and entrepreneur. There's kind of like a spectrum. Like most people, even if they're entrepreneurial, like my business partner, my wife, she's not an entrepreneur. She'll tell you that, but she's a very successful business owner because of how available it is for us. Like I mentioned before, it's never been easier to start a business, but by and large, she's not entrepreneurial by nature. So here's the deal. People that are entrepreneurial, people like me that are kind of inherently born that way, have the characteristics, the traits. And by the way, I say that sometimes more as a curse than a blessing, depending on what day you ask me. We tend to look at the world through the lens of optimism. Being successful at doing this, it necessitates that you look at the world, through a very contrarian lens, because you have to be really rebellious to look at the world and be like, this sucks and I can do it better. That comes from a place of serious like renegade mentality. But then also to look at the world optimistically enough to be like, I can do it better. That's even bolder of a statement, right? Now, here's the problem. You take that person with that mindset in the real world consequences of just quitting a job and jumping into a startup business and all those things that we've talked about. What ends up happening is they come in with that optimistic lens of, I have no money saved, but I'm going to make it work. It's going to happen. All those various things. So you kind of need guardrails. And so the one guardrail that I make sure that everybody has, and if they don't have it, then there's things you can do. But if at all possible, 6 to 12 months of money you can live off of reserve money. Meaning, if you don't make another dollar, could you last for 6? And Robert Kiyosaki actually says that's the true measure of wealth, is how long you could sustain your livelihood if you stop doing what you're doing right now. For some people, they're making enough passive income. They could do that for years and years and years. For some people, that's 3 days, right? So figure out where you are. Now, like I said, I'm not trying to, poo-poo on people's dreams here. If you're like, man, I got a month and that's about it. Okay, fine. Well, guess what? We're going to do the opposite of what I said before. I said side hustler, meaning you're young, you don't have a lot of real world responsibilities like kids, mortgage, stuff like that. You're going to do side hustles. And that's totally fine, because then that way you're going to really kind of extend your runway while also still working on your business full time, if not, completely subsidize whatever you need for a period of time. The other option is this. So if you're not at 6 to 12 months, which again is what I recommend, it's the ideal of the ideal. It's the blue sky scenario, would be to be a night or a weekend warrior, right? So what does that mean? Keeping your job, your current job, the one you might hate, and that's why you're listening to this and listening to me talk about this. At night, you're going to try to put in 2 hours. The next morning, you're going to try to put in 2 hours. Now you might be like, I don't have 4 hours. That's totally fine. Okay, guess what? I said weekends. I said night and weekend. So you're going to say, let's say you can do an hour to an evening. Whatever you have not fulfilled of the time and I'm going to tell you how much it needs to be done, your allotment every single week. You're going to do that on the weekends. So it's going to be your Saturday afternoon, your Sunday afternoon, right? You get home from your kid's soccer game. Okay, great. Well, while they're taking a nap or doing what they're doing, playing outside, you're focused and locked in on your business. Now, the goal is to get to 20 hours a week. So it's truly part-time. Now, I know that's a lot. People working 40 hours a week. They've got kids. They've got other things. Nobody said it was going to be easy. But if you truly want to move in the direction of having your own business, that 20 hours is going to go a long way. And I'll tell you a story. The person that I met that's now become a friend, he had a very, very demanding engineering job. He did 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, 5 days a week, worked on the weekends with a girlfriend, the whole shebang. But he was, he just couldn't give up. He had a 6-figure job, right? So he couldn't just give that up. He did that for a year or so. By the time he left his job, Cedric, he walked into a 7-figure business. Wow. He grew his business to 7 figures. Yes, it's going to be hard. Ain't nobody said it was going to be easy. But the last thing I would say is this. You've got to make sure you've got your mind right. I cannot state that. I cannot state that enough. The stress and the pressure that is starting your own business, you are under such a magnifying glass that you will quickly see all of the best of you and all of the worst of you. And there oftentimes when I see business owners fail, it's because something with themselves, they got in their own way. They got in their own way. It wasn't that it was a bad idea. It wasn't that there wasn't opportunity in the market. It wasn't that other people hadn't done it successfully. It was something that they carried in. Let's call it baggage, for lack of a better term, unaddressed, unresolved issues, or mindset issues, limiting beliefs, et cetera, they brought in that they just could not overcome. So having coaches, having accountability partners, having masterminds, whatever that looks like, this is a lifestyle. It's not a career. You have to evolve and change almost everything about you to do this successfully. And the problem is that you're going in with decades of conditioning, because the life of the industrial age, which is the whole system that we live in this world right now, was spawned out of the industrial age, which was go to school, learn to do what you're told so that you can be a cog in the wheel so that the system keeps churning. That is the antithesis of what's required to be a good entrepreneur. Literally the exact opposite. I can't tell you, Cedric, how I'll spend 6 months desperately trying to help them break that old conditioning, divorcing their taskmaster, all the things that necessitate being a successful entrepreneur, focusing on impact, not time. Because if I could have you do one thing that helps you get to way closer to your goals over 20 things, you can tick a box and say you did, which one would you choose? Because in a job, if you said, hey, I did one thing that mattered today, boss. Okay, what about the 19 other things that had on your list that you're supposed to do in accordance with your job responsibilities? You're fired. right? It doesn't work like that. You can tell your science teacher, hey, science isn't a priority for me right now,
Man.
but math really is. So I
Yeah.
ignored that. Okay, you fail and you repeat this grade, right? So it's completely the antithesis, and that's really, really hard. It's a big mistake I see people make is they underestimate the transformation that they have to go through, right? To truly go through that metamorphosis of becoming a butterfly from a caterpillar.
The knowledge bomb. Let's talk about StartupU. What
Yeah.
inspired you to begin this journey and why?
What we're talking about, honestly, man, when that first, we talk about growth and, that first business and hitting multiple seven figures, and I'm 25, 26 years old. And, I'm working with 5 of the 7 major turnkey furniture manufacturers around the country because we went from a residential moving company into doing furniture installation. So we had 2 divisions. We had a residential and a commercial division.
Yes.
So think fully furnished student apartment. There's one here we did in Austin, 27 stories. We did all that in 21 days, 6,000 pieces of furniture we installed. That's crazy. That's like I had hundreds of employees all over the place. I mean, it was nuts. You find out quickly doing that just how ill prepared you are for entrepreneurship.
Mm.
And so I remember multiple times I was like, I wish I had known this 6 months ago. Like 2014, the name of my life was cash flow, because at one point at the end of that year, I was actually owed like $453,000. But I made 1.2, but wasn't big enough in the world to be able to withstand a revenue lag of $453,000 or $443,000, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So I was dying to make payroll every 2 weeks, even though I was owed all this money. Why? Because these are big companies and they push off their cash flow issues onto us, right? We're the last link in the chain. We're the last people to get paid. So I had sunk all these costs into completing this assignment, but I hadn't been paid for any of it yet. And I've paid, however much it costs. If the project was $127,000, I've got 80 of it in expenses. We would profit 40 maybe if we were lucky.
Yeah.
You're doing 50 of those or 60 of those around the country in 1 year. You got problems. You got cash flow problems. So I didn't learn any of that in school, right? And I'm not here to boo-boo on school. I think that it is what it is for a lot of people, and it works. That's me being politically correct.
Being nice, right? Yeah.
That's me being politically correct.
I definitely understand. I feel the same way, man. I mean, it sets us up for a disadvantage because it teach you how to remember, but it don't teach you how to think. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that process where they're learning and they're remembering, because I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm 43 years old. And I remember when I was in elementary school, they taught us by memory that there were 9 planets. And I remember about 5-10 years later, found out there were way more than 9 planets.
Yeah.
And I passed a test because if I would have said 20, I would have been wrong. I had to say 9. So I had to say according to the so-called facts they had, and I had to memorize, but I wasn't taught to think. And man, this is a totally different ball game. And what you're saying, and you mentioned this about sometimes you spending 6 months to try to trying to get people to think different towards entrepreneurship. What are some big belief systems that you try to break?
Oh man, I'll give you one. So I try to develop mechanisms, because mechanisms people understand mechanisms because that's what they learned, right? It was very, everything we did was very mechanized, like schooling, right? You had it was regimented. It was, you have to do this by this, and this is the structure, and this is how you do things. And right. So I feel like I try to pull in new mechanisms, because the problem with entrepreneurship is we can say things, but it's vague, it's ambiguous. So we have to think differently. Okay, what would that mean, right? Like how you just inherently wake up one day and flip a switch? No, I don't believe that. I'm a big believer in habits, huge believer in habits. I think that we grossly, actually I was just reading how statistically speaking, they found that most people grossly underestimate the power of habits. And I'm a big fan of that book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, by the way, for those that are looking for some extra homework. There's 2 that I'll give you that have been very, very powerful. And every time, I guarantee you watch this is going to happen, Cedric. We're going to get a few people that email me from this and be like, oh, it was amazing, because I don't know, people just really resonate with this. I've had people had me on their show just to talk about this mechanism. The first one is called PAID, P-A-D-E, right? So I get paid, but P-A-D-E stands for prioritize, automate, delegate, eliminate. So what you're going to do is this, and you can start a Trello board to do this, or you can just write down on paper. You're going to write down all the things you're currently doing in your business, right? This is assuming you already have a business, but if you're planning to go into business, again, you can start to kind of forecast too, right? Yeah. All the things you do. The reason I like it on Trello is because you can drag and drop. After you write all of your list of things that need to be done, things you're doing or things that just need to be done in general, you're going to go through and you're going to slide it under your first list, right? Which is the P, paid, right? So paid, so it's prioritize. Those are the things that only you can do. Okay, so if you were to give yourself a job, let's say you are the boss of this company and you're hiring yourself as the manager, because that's really what it is. You're wearing multiple hats. You're the owner of the business, But you also at a point where you need a manager right now.
Yeah.
Like Bezos is done with Amazon. He's not involved. But at one point he was a CEO.
Yeah.
Now he's gone. So he was both.
Yeah.
Right? He was founder and CEO. Founder / CEO. You see that on people's titles all the time, right? If you were to hire a CEO, what are the things you would have them do? Say, okay, well, I wouldn't have them blogging, or I wouldn't have them doing, things that aren't something a CEO would do. That's crazy. Okay. Well, most people, they aren't at that point. They can't do that. That's fine. We're going to get to that. That's why the pay process exists. So the next thing, and this is where people skip, right, is they go to the D, which is to delegate. So they go, here's all of my stuff. I'm going to try to juggle it all. I'm juggling. I'm not prioritizing anything. I'm just doing all the things, right? Because guess what? That's what you learn in school. Taskmaster mode. You wake up every day, you got 27 things to do. Well, here's the problem. Entrepreneurship, if your business grows, let's say your business does grow and you do start succeeding, the list is only going to get longer. It was already long, but as the business grows, guess what also grows? The list of things to do.
Yeah.
So now you've got a person that already has busted their butt and sacrificed everything to get the business a relative degree of success. Now you're giving them even more stuff to do and more stuff to do and more stuff to do. And they still can't afford help because they're jumping straight to the delegate part of it. So what do? They burn out. And then when they burn out, guess what they do? They make desperate decisions, like going and hire somebody and they can't afford a salary because they're barely paying themselves. And then the business goes out of business. And then they go back to a job and say, oh my God, it was the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. See it all the time because they're skipping the next part, which is A. I mentioned this has been the best time in the world to ever start a business. Why? Technology. Why? Data. Why? Information. All those various things. Automate is going to be your first hire should be your tool stack. I have people all the time. You wouldn't believe this, Cedric. I'm sure you see it too. They'll reach out via email and go back and forth, try to go back and forth with my assistant about booking me on their show. Dude, there's tools that can do that for you.
Absolutely.
Put in your availability for the whole month and let them book a slot that works for them. There's no need to have an exchange of 30 emails back and forth to book one podcast recording. But business owners are constantly getting bogged down in the nuance, in the nonsense that shouldn't require a person. It should be something that a system can do that costs you $5 to $10 a month to pay for. That's your first hire, your tools. That's what systems do well. They do repetitive processes over and over and over again. And you don't have to think about it. You just set it and forget it. What's something you can do once and never have to do it again? That's your systems. So under your list of things to do, yes, the things you prioritize, but then the next thing of all your list of things, what can you automate? And reasonably, do they have free levels? Is there another competitor tool that's cheaper? What can you do to start automating those things so that you never have to worry about it again? So it just does what it does. Then, we're really focused on your priorities. So we're growing the business. We're making more revenue. We've got things steamrolling because you've got your first few hires and your tools. Then we look to delegate. Well, we're going to outsource partners. So like HR, payroll, stuff like that. Again, you'd be further along to have to actually do payroll. That's probably not the best example, but things of that nature, you're going to want to outsource or look to outsourcing first. I'm not a fan of outsourcing marketing. Let me be abundantly clear. Do not give money to somebody to just go run ads on a Facebook account for you. Please do not do that. I believe marketing should always be done in-house. I always qualify that because people think, oh, outsource my marketing. No, terrible idea. It never works. And this is coming from a guy that does marketing coaching, okay? Virtual assistants. We're talking about things going through, getting to your inbox zero, going through and helping you create assets for social media, going through and making sure your books are up to date and they're reconciled. Those are things you hire a virtual assistant to do. And it could be overseas. We have an entire team overseas in multiple countries. Here's the deal. You people wait too long to get to that point, Cedric, because they think they have to hire them full time and commit to these large salaries. There are people over there that are looking for part-time work, just like people that look for part-time work here. They're like, hey, I can come home and I can work on my computer and make extra money and work work 5 hours a week for this company. Or they have multiple people they work for. They work for 4 or 5 different companies doing the same type of work. Let's say they do blogging. Well, they blog for 4 or 5 different people as like a freelancer, and they cost like $2 to $3 an hour starting. Now, more advanced people are more expensive, but even really advanced people are maybe $10 to $15 an hour. That's super on the super extreme. But for basic general virtual assistant, easy peasy, $3 an hour, rock and roll all day. You get them for an hour a day, five days a week. You get rid of your Starbucks coffee and you've paid for that, literally. Right? Then we've got E. Right? So we've got PAD, D was delegate, E is eliminate. Okay. That means this. People struggle with this so much, Cedric. It's so important. We are so much of the mindset that we have to do all the things that we forget that we don't have to do all the things when it comes to running a business. In the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller, my favorite business book of all time. It's like I don't want to be blasphemous, but it's like my business Bible, honestly, because it's the constant reminder of what's the one thing, what's the most important thing, what's the most important thing. And I'll challenge people's kind of societal beliefs about this. What did Amazon do when they started? Did they start delivering all this stuff to your house all the things that you could possibly dream of under the sun. I mean, I dare somebody to try to put something in Amazon, an inflatable elephant pool toy. And I guarantee you there's like 12,000 options. Like, it's like the craziest stuff you could think of is on there. It was just books. That's all they did was books. They focused on the one thing. And if you listen to Bezos, he actually talked about how they knew that was where they could penetrate the market. And so they did. And then they started expanding. They grew from there, right? So we don't give ourselves permission to eliminate. That's the last category, eliminate. If it's not a priority and you can't automate it and you can delegate it, you're going to eliminate it. It doesn't mean you're eliminating it forever. It doesn't mean you're going to have to say bon voyage. It just means right now. No, it's just short for not now. That's all it is, right? So you're put in that E category. So if you go through that process, that paid process, and you consistently do that maybe once a quarter and make sure you're reprioritizing, making sure you're automating the way you should, making sure you have, can I delegate? Can we afford to delegate? And then what do we need to eliminate? Based off that, with your whole team going through that process, I can almost guarantee you will have that mechanism to be able to operate the way you should as an entrepreneur. And there's one other one, I don't know if we have time to get into it, but it's called LITR, L-I-T-R, learn, implement, test, repeat. That's as much as you need to know about it. It's learn the things you need to learn, to implement the things you need to implement, to test the things you need to test, which is people forget about one of those, and then repeat the process. So habitual learners, they need to take action. They don't implement enough. People like me that implement like crazy, but we don't spend the time to actually learn what we're doing first, need to go get a book or take a course on the things we're doing so that we can do it with efficiency. And then we need to test it and make sure it's actually working. We can't just do something with low optimal rates, like a sales page conversion, and then just we're not converting well, but we're continuing to send more traffic to a page that's not converting, and then repeat that process. If you do those two things, I can promise you, you're on the right track to being a successful business owner.
Chris, those are a load of knowledge bombs. Wow, man, this is amazing. This is amazing. I want to shift because you mentioned 2 books already. I want you to name about 5 books that you would highly recommend to a business startup.
Okay, I know 3 immediately. Okay, The One Thing by Gary Keller, mentioned that one. I would read Rework by the guys at Basecamp, Jason Fried, and can't remember who his co-author is for that. Super short, super punchy. I think it's fantastic. I think you're going to be well on your way with that one. Then I would read Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Mike's a good friend of my podcast. Phenomenal book. It's going to help you get off on the right foot. Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg. Habits are going to be your best friend. I already mentioned that one. Definitely read that one. And then the last one, I would say, let's do Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy.
It's a great one.
If you throw out 5th one, I think you'd be on the right track. Any Maxwell book.
Brilliant.
It's just, you can't, like, that guy, God bless that man to do what he's doing in the world. He's doing the Lord's work, seriously.
Yes, he is.
So anything Maxwell is fantastic. You need to find people that are where you are at. And I know I mentioned masterminds, accountability groups, stuff like that. I think that's all extremely, extremely beneficial. Meeting with those people on a once a month basis, talking about what's going on in your business. If you're in a similar season with your growth or with whatever position you're in, even if it's not your own business, I think having a group like that you can rely on, you're going to help lift each other up. The rising sea will raise all boats, however it goes. You know what I'm trying to say? So I think that's fantastic. The last one I would say is, and again, it sounds cliche, but to find a mentor. Now, I will say this, usually to find a good mentor, you probably pay them first, meaning our best mentors we pay for, right? Like, we pay for their coach. So, coaching, consulting, et cetera. We become friends, but a lot of people are like, how do I find a mentor? Well, usually it starts with a financial commitment, because to find one that's worthy, like, how many people are sitting around, and people do this, but how many like really, truly kick-ass, awesome business people, entrepreneurs that you actually want to learn from are just sitting around waiting for a stranger to mentor to, right? Not many. I certainly don't have time to just mentor every single person that comes across my inbox. However, if you make a commitment, an investment in me, I'm in turn going to invest in you. And a lot of these people will underestimate. You don't have to start with their flagship program. You don't have to go pay. Some of my mentors, we pay $50,000. This is crazy. This is a true story. We pay $50,000 for a 1-day session with one of my mentors. 1 day. And it's worth it, and it ROIs, and it's a great tax write-off at the end of the year. And my friends don't understand why I do it. They're like, go buy a Tesla. I'm like, well, I can write this off. I can't necessarily write the Tesla off, but I can write this off.
Absolutely.
But I've always gotten an ROI on that. But you don't have to go straight to the top tier offer. Join their membership. If it's $19 a month, okay, then cut your Netflix and HBO Max, and there's your $19 right there. Get involved. Engage with them on social media. It can be a digital mentor too. Like, if it's just somebody that you follow online and you learn from, okay, engage with their stuff and learn from the things they have to say. There's never been a time. I mean, Cedric is providing amazing value to you guys via this podcast. Follow his content because he's effectively digitally mentoring you through the people he's having on and through his own wisdom and knowledge himself.
Chris, thank you so much. So Chris, I want to do this. If someone right now wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, on social media at HeyCMH on all platforms is great. And then you go to HeyCMH, and that's like Chris Michael Harris. Hey, like hello, and CMH like Chris Michael Harris. Everywhere you'd want to know. We have tons of free resources on the site. We drop a ton of stuff on social media that you can follow that I think you really get a lot of value out of. But I do, my actual big call to action for all of you listening. Most people, if you're listening and you don't have a podcast, you don't know the work that entails. Like you're seeing, the lights are on, right? And you're seeing the performance. But what you don't see is the work that this entails for Cedric to do what he does. Absolutely. There's research ahead of time. He had to look into who I was. Yeah. He has to go through and edit the things, all the things that we said and add the sound bites and all the stuff, right? To make this an amazing product for you. So I have an ask. It takes 20 seconds to do so. And I promise you, if it takes you more than 20 seconds, you can @me on social media and call me a liar. Two things. I'll tell you why. The first is subscribe. The second is leave a review, because those are the top two things that podcast apps, like the one you're listening on right now, that's what they look for in terms of showing that show to other people. So it helps Cedric out a lot to reach more people like you, to help more people like you. It's like leaving a tip for your waiter or your waitress. And I promise you it only takes 20 seconds. If you do that for me, for Cedric, I'd be tremendously and eternally grateful and would much appreciate it.
Oh man, thank you so much, Chris. On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, we want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us all.
Of course, man, I loved it.
And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And if this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.